You know those cop shows where someone gets arrested and dramatically shouts, "I know my rights"? Yeah, most people actually don't. And cops, they're counting on that. That legal system has more hidden trapdoors than a magician's stage, and law enforcement knows exactly where every single one is located. From shield laws that make accountability nearly impossible to search tactics that bypass warrant requirements, this list is about to blow your mind. These aren't loopholes you can exploit to get out of trouble. These are loopholes cops use every single day that most people have no clue exist. Understanding how the system actually works? That's the real power move here. And before we dive in, let me be clear. This is for educational purposes. Knowing your rights and how they can be sidestepped is important. Using this knowledge to do something stupid? Yeah, that's on you, not me. Don't blame Mike when things go sideways. I'm Mike with List 25, and today I'm breaking down 25 loopholes in the law that cops don't want you to know. And if you love learning stuff that makes you see the system differently, well then be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, click that notification bell so you don't miss out on any new content, and let us know what other topics you'd like to hear. With that being said, let's go. 25. Qualified Immunity Shield. Ever wonder how a police officer can do something wildly unconstitutional and then just walk away from a lawsuit? Welcome to qualified immunity, the legal superpower that makes officers nearly untouchable in civil court. Qualified immunity protects government officials, usually cops, from being personally sued unless they violated a, quote, clearly established constitutional right. Sounds reasonable, right? Wrong. The catch is that there has to be a previous court case with almost identical facts proving that exact action was illegal. And I mean identical. One small, seemingly insignificant difference? Sorry, no precedent. Case dismissed. This means victims of police misconduct lose their lawsuits not because the officer's behavior was justified, but because no court has ruled on that hyper-specific scenario before. An officer can violate your rights in a brand new creative way, and the courts will shrug and say, well, nobody's done it quite like that before. Critics call it an accountability shield. Supporters say it protects officers from frivolous lawsuits. Either way, it's one of the most controversial loopholes in civil rights law. 24. Internal affairs secrecy. Remember that time you got written up at work and HR plastered it all over your file for eternity? Well, when cops get in trouble, their dirty laundry gets locked in a vault and seemingly thrown into the abyss. Internal affairs investigations are supposed to hold officers accountable for misconduct, right? Yes, they are. But in reality, they operate like the world's worst-kept secret that nobody's actually allowed to know. Officer accused of brutality or corruption? The details stay locked away. Officers cleared, punished, or just slapped on the wrist? You'll never find out. Sometimes even the victims are denied access to the findings. It's like playing a game where the referee won't tell you the score. The excuse? Officer privacy and fair investigations. The reality? It's a system where bad behavior gets swept under the rug and everyone pretends the rug isn't suspiciously lumpy. Union contracts and state laws make these files harder to access than Area 51 documents. Internal affairs sounds official and accountable, but it's really more like internal protection services. When nobody can see what happens behind those closed doors, accountability becomes a suggestion instead of a requirement. 23. Police Bill of Rights protections. Pop quiz. What happens when you get accused of something at work? You probably get called into a meeting and grilled by your boss. What happens when a cop gets accused of misconduct? They get a literal Bill of Rights that protects them like royalty. Several U.S. states have enacted police bills of rights, special laws giving officers procedural safeguards that regular employees could only dream of. I'm talking advance notice before questioning, the right to review evidence beforehand, and sometimes the ability to have disciplinary records erased after a few years like they never existed. These protections were sold as preventing unfair treatment, which sounds noble, Except they also make it incredibly difficult to investigate and discipline officers effectively. In some states, civilians can't even conduct interrogations. Cases get tangled in red tape and officers walk away clean. So yes, there's a Bill of Rights for police officers, and it's way more generous than yours. 22. Union contract record stealing. Remember how I just talked about Police Bill of Rights, letting officers erase their disciplinary records? Well, it gets better. Police union contracts have their own built-in memory erasing feature, and it's working overtime. Union contracts often include clauses requiring disciplinary records to be deleted, sealed, or hidden after just a few years. Got a complaint in 2020? By 2023, poof, it was gone. These provisions are negotiated between unions and local governments, supposedly to prevent officers from being judged for old mistakes. Noble idea, terrible execution. When records disappear, departments lose track of patterns. Repeat offenders can bounce to a new police department across town with a sparkling clean record like nothing ever happened. Journalists trying to investigate? Nope, it's blocked. Oversight board trying to dig for patterns? Yeah, nice try. Prosecutors needing background info? Sorry, that file's self-destructed. Combined with the internal affairs secrecy I discussed earlier, it's like a 1-2 punch against accountability. The public rarely learns about an officer's disciplinary past because legally, it doesn't exist anymore. Convenient, right? 21. Arbitration Reinstatement. Fired an officer for serious misconduct? Don't celebrate just yet. Thanks to union contracts, yes, the same ones that erase records I just talked about, that termination might not stick. Police unions have baked arbitration clauses into their contracts that let fired officers appeal to a private arbitrator. This person, not the police chief or the public, gets to decide if the firing was fair. Again, sounds reasonable, except arbitrators overturn terminations all the time, even in cases involving excessive force, dishonesty, or straight-up criminal behavior. The kicker? These proceedings are private. No public oversight, no transparency, and the reasoning stays hidden. Studies show that in many cities, a huge chunk of fired officers get their jobs back through arbitration, sometimes with back pay for their trouble. So an officer can get canned for misconduct, disappear for a few months, and then show up right back on duty like nothing happened. Justice served, right? 20. Civilian Review Board limits. You'd think civilian oversight boards would be the answer to police accountability, right? Independent citizens reviewing complaints and keeping officers in check? That sounds perfect. Except, most of these boards have about as much power as a mall security cop. Here's the problem. Most civilian review boards can't issue subpoenas, can't compel testimony, and can't enforce disciplinary action. They can investigate all they want, but at the end of the day, they can only make recommendations. The police department can look at those recommendations, shrug, and toss them in the trash. Without subpoena power or access to evidence, these boards are essentially toothless watchdogs. They can bark all they want, but there's no bite. Complaints get delayed, minimalized, or ignored completely, and the public rarely sees outcomes. Critics say civilian review boards are more symbolic than effective, a way for cities to look like they care about accountability without actually giving these boards any real authority. 19. Routine booking question exception. You've seen it a million times on TV. The cops slap on the cuffs and immediately read the Miranda rights. You have the right to remain silent. Classic. Except in real life, officers don't always have to do that right away, and they use that to their advantage. Miranda warnings are only required once you're in custody and being interrogated about a crime. Before that magical moment, officers can ask all the routine questions they want. Name, address, where you work, all fair game without any warnings. Sounds harmless, right? Here's the trick. Anything you say during those casual pre-Miranda questions can absolutely be used against you in court. Officers know this, and we'll keep things friendly and conversational to get you talking before the official interrogation starts. So while you're thinking, oh, you're just having a chat, they are building a case. By the time Miranda rights get read, the damage is already done. 18. Pretextual traffic stops. Got a broken taillight? Forget to use your blinker? Your registration sticker expired last month. Well, buckle up, because you just handed police the perfect excuse to pull you over and start poking around for way bigger fish. Pretextual traffic stops happen when cops use some tiny traffic violation to pull you over, but that's not what they actually care about. They don't give a damn about your taillight. What they want is to run your license for warrants, peek inside your car, or see if you get nervous enough to slip up and give them probable cause for a real search. Courts say this is totally fine as long as the traffic violation is legit. Doesn't matter if the officer's real goal is hunting for drugs or weapons. That busted taillight is their golden ticket, and everything that happens after is fair game. Critics say this whole thing is just a workaround to dodge Fourth Amendment protections, but hey, if that light's out, the stop counts as legal. 17. Plain view expansion. So, you just got pulled over for that pretextual traffic stop I talked about, and now the officer is leaning into your window, craning their neck, and suddenly, they spot something suspicious. What luck! The plain view doctrine says if a cop is somewhere they're legally allowed to be and they see evidence of a crime without searching for it, they can seize it without a warrant. Makes sense on paper. The problem? Officers have gotten really creative with what counts as plain view. Was that baggie really sitting out in the open on your passenger seat, or did the officer have to lean way in and squint to see it under the jacket? Did they spot that pipe on the floorboard, or did they move some stuff around first? Once they claim plain view, good luck arguing otherwise. Courts are supposed to figure out if the observation was genuinely obvious, or if the officer fudged things to justify a search. Spoiler alert, that line gets real blurry real fast. 16. Inventory searches after arrest. Getting arrested means your stuff needs to be cataloged and stored, right? Wallet, keys, phones, whatever's in your pockets. It's supposed to protect your property and keep officers from getting accused of stealing your things. Again, sounds reasonable and responsible. Except, here's what actually happens. Officers use inventory searches as an excuse to dig through your belongings looking for evidence of crimes you weren't even arrested for. They'll claim they're just making a list of your stuff, but really they're hunting for drugs, weapons, or anything incriminating. Courts generally allow inventory searches without a warrant as long as departments follow standardized procedures. But those procedures leave plenty of wiggle room for officers to poke around. Find something illegal during an inventory check? That's getting seized and used against you. The whole thing is supposed to be administrative and protective. In reality, it's just another way to search without needing probable cause or a warrant. 15. Use of anonymous informants. You know how you're not supposed to believe everything you read on the internet from anonymous strangers? Well, police don't follow that rule. They'll act on tips from unidentified sources and use them to arrest people or get search warrants, and you'd be shocked how little verification is required. Anonymous informants can be valuable for uncovering crimes that aren't obvious. The problem? There's often zero way to check if the tipster is credible, has a vendetta, or is just making stuff up for fun. Courts generally want some corroboration, surveillance, witnesses, or other evidence, but in practice, arrests happen all the time based mostly on some guy said so. Your crazy ex could call in a fake tip and boom, suddenly there are cops at your door with a warrant. The informant stays anonymous, so you can't even challenge their credibility in court. It's like getting Yelp reviewed into an arrest. 1 star. Would not recommend. 14. Parallel construction. This one's sneaky as hell. Parallel construction is when police obtain evidence through questionable or illegal means, then create a fake paper trail to make it look like they found it legitimately. It's basically evidence laundering. Let's say cops get a tip from the classified surveillance program or an illegal wiretap. They can't admit that in court because it would get the evidence thrown out. So instead, they work backwards and create a story. They'll claim they got the info from a traffic stop, a routine search, or a concerned citizen tip. The evidence is the same, but the origin story is completely fabricated. This protects their secret sources and methods, but it also makes it impossible for defendants to challenge how the evidence was actually obtained. Your lawyer can't fight what they don't know exists. Courts and defense attorneys have been screaming about this for years, but it keeps happening. The evidence gets used, convictions stick, and nobody admits the real story. 13. Knock and talk ambiguity. Someone knocks on your door. You open it. Cops. They're smiling and acting friendly, saying, they just want to ask you a few quick questions. No big deal, right? Yeah, about that. Knock and talk encounters are technically voluntary. You're allowed to say no, shut the door, and go back to watching Netflix. Except most people don't know that, and officers aren't exactly broadcasting it. So you stand there awkwardly while they ask questions, and before you know it, they're inside your house. Fast forward to court, and suddenly those officers claim you gave them permission to enter and search. Did you actually say that? Probably not. But there's no recording, no witness, and now it's your word against theirs. Good luck with that. The whole thing is supposed to be consensual, but when multiple uniformed officers are standing at your door, consent gets really fuzzy really fast. It's a workaround that lets cops skip getting a warrant entirely. 12. Exigent circumstances overclaim. Emergency, crisis, lives at stake. Or maybe not. But that's what officers will claim to justify barging in your house without a warrant. Exigent circumstances are supposed to cover real emergencies. Someone's about to die, evidence is being destroyed, a suspect is escaping. Fair enough. The problem is how often this exception gets stretched like taffy to cover situations that aren't remotely urgent. Heard a noise inside? Exigent circumstances. Someone might be flushing drugs? Exigent circumstances. Got a vague tip that maybe something's going down? You guessed it. Exigent circumstances. The Fourth Amendment requires warrants for searches, but officers can bypass that entirely by claiming there's no time. Courts are supposed to review whether the emergency was legit, but by then the search already happened and the evidence is sitting in a locker somewhere. It's a convenient backdoor that turns minor situations into 5-alarm fires whenever a warrant feels like too much paperwork. 11. Asset forfeiture during arrest. Congrats! You just got arrested. And as a bonus prize, the police are taking your car, your cash, and whatever else they feel like seizing. No conviction needed, no trial, just gone. Civil asset forfeiture lets law enforcement grab your property if they just suspect, it's connected to a crime. They don't need to prove you're guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. They only need a preponderance of evidence, which is lawyer speak for, maybe. You can lose your stuff without ever being charged with anything. Your car gets impounded, your savings disappear into a police department budget, and good luck getting it back. The process to reclaim your property is expensive, bureaucratic, and can drag on for years. Some departments have turned this into a profit machine, funding their operations by seizing assets. Critics call it policing for profit. Supporters say it fights crime. Either way, your stuff is gone. 10. Jury selection, or grand jury secrecy used tactically. Grand juries and jury selection are supposed to be confidential to protect witnesses and keep things fair. Noble idea. Except when it comes to police misconduct, that secrecy becomes a shield instead of a safeguard. Officers under investigation can testify in closed-door grand jury proceedings where the public never sees what happens. No media coverage, no transcripts, no accountability. Defense attorneys and community advocates are locked out, and key information stays buried. This confidentiality is supposed to preserve integrity and protect witnesses. In reality, It creates a one-sided process where law enforcement essentially investigates itself without oversight. Prosecutors control what evidence gets presented, and nobody outside the room knows if the full story was even told. Supporters say secrecy is necessary to avoid prejudicing jurors. Critics say it's a convenient way to make accountability disappear behind closed doors. Either way, what happens in that room stays in that room. 9. Deception about evidence. Cops can lie to you during an interrogation? The answer is yes, absolutely. And they do it all the time with zero consequences. Officers are legally allowed to make up evidence to get you to confess. They'll claim they have your fingerprints at the crime scene, DNA results that nail you, surveillance footage, or a witness who saw everything. None of it has to be real. They can literally invent evidence out of thin air, and courts say that's totally fine. The logic is that as long as they're not physically threatening you or making the confession involuntary, little fibbing is a fair game in the adversarial system. You're free to call their bluff and lawyer up. Most people don't, though, because they're panicking and convinced the fake evidence is real. So yeah, when cops say they've got the goods on you, they might be completely making it up. Fun times. 8. Using friendly conversation. I just talked about cops lying during interrogations, but this next one is even sneakier. They'll stop acting like cops and start acting like your buddy who just wants to help you out. All of a sudden, the officer gets friendly, cracking jokes, being sympathetic, asking questions that seem harmless. The vibe shifts from, you're in trouble, to, oh, we're just talking. And that's exactly the trap. You relax, you start chatting, and before you know it, you're volunteering information you absolutely should not be sharing. Here's the thing. Miranda rights protect you during formal interrogation, but if cops make it feel casual enough, they can claim it wasn't an interrogation at all. Just two people talking. You were comfortable, so you chose to speak, right? Courts can't even agree on where the line is. Officers get trained to make that line as fuzzy as possible. One minute you think you're having a normal conversation, the next minute everything you said is getting used against you in court. 7. Delay in charging. Getting arrested sucks, obviously. But here's something even worse. Getting arrested and then just sitting in a cell while the cops take their sweet time deciding what to actually charge you with. Pre-charge detention is when police hold you in custody but don't officially file charges. You're stuck in this weird legal purgatory where you're detained, getting questioned, and under massive pressure to cooperate, but you don't have all the constitutional protections that kick in once formal charges get filed. Why do they do this? Because the delay works in their favor. They can gather more evidence, stress you out, and push you to talk or cut a deal just to end the nightmare. You're sitting in a cell freaking out with no idea when this ends, which makes you way more likely to give them what they want. Some delays are supposedly for complex investigations. Others are just psychological warfare. Either way, sitting in jail for weeks with no charges filed is its own special kind of torture. 6. Suppressed or undisclosed informant unreliability. Remember those anonymous informants from earlier who can get you arrested with zero proof? Well, it gets worse. Sometimes prosecutors and police know their informant is a lying, unreliable snitch, and they just don't tell anyone. Informants have a history of giving false tips, making things up for reward money, or cutting deals to reduce their own sentences. Defense attorneys should know about this so they can challenge the informant's credibility in court. Except, the prosecution conveniently forgets to mention any of that. Historic cases have shown informants with track records of dishonesty being used as star witnesses while their shady past stays hidden. By the time the truth comes out, if it ever does at all, someone's already been wrongfully convicted. The defense is supposed to get all the evidence that could help their case, but when prosecutors bury informant problems, trials become rigged games where one side doesn't even know the dice are loaded. 5. Move along orders. So, you're standing on a sidewalk, minding your own business, and a cop walks up and tells you to move along. You weren't breaking any laws, you weren't bothering anyone, but now you're being ordered to leave. and it's not exactly a suggestion. Move along orders are when officers tell you to get out of the area without actually arresting you or charging you with anything. Technically, it's supposed to be voluntary. Except when someone in uniform with a badge and a gun is giving you orders, voluntary goes out the window pretty fast. These orders are supposedly used for public safety or to prevent loitering. In reality, they're used to break up protests, clear out homeless people, or move along anyone the cops find inconvenient. Refuse to comply? Now you're getting arrested for obstruction or disorderly conduct. It's a workaround that lets officers control where you can stand and when without needing probable cause or a warrant. First Amendment right to assemble? Yeah, that gets real shaky when officers start barking orders. 4. Use of administrative warrants. Want to search someone's property but don't have enough evidence for a criminal warrant? No problem. Just call it a code inspection instead. Administrative warrants are supposed to be for civil stuff. Health inspections, building code checks, licensing compliance. They have way lower standards than criminal warrants because they're not supposed to be about finding evidence of crimes. Except that's exactly how they get used. Inspectors show up to check for code violations and whoops, they just happen to stumble across some drugs, weapons, or other criminal evidence. Oh, nuts. Now that evidence gets handed to law enforcement for prosecution. The Fourth Amendment protections that normally apply to criminal searches? Yeah, those don't fully kick in because the entry was technically administrative. It's a backdoor that lets authorities search property without meeting the higher bar required for criminal investigations. Just slap a civil label on it and walk right in. 3. Officers can make a protective sweep. Just got arrested in your own hometown? Congrats! The cops now get to wander around and check for threats in every room. It's called a protective sweep, and it's exactly as convenient for them as it sounds. After a lawful arrest, officers can do a quick sweep of areas where someone dangerous might be hiding. Sounds reasonable, right? Officer safety and all that. The problem is what counts as a sweep and what's actually just snooping around hoping to find evidence. The sweep is supposed to be brief and limited to places where a person could realistically hide. But if officers happen to spot drugs, weapons, or anything incriminating during their safety check, that evidence is fair game. The justification has to be safety focused, but once they're in, the line between protecting themselves and searching for evidence gets real blurry real fast. Critics say it's a workaround. Supporters say it's necessary. Either way, your house just became open season. 2. Consent to give ID. In some states, refusing to show your ID to a cop can get you arrested even if you weren't doing anything illegal. Yep, you can literally get arrested for not having papers on you. This depends on where you live and whether the officer has reasonable suspicion you're involved in something criminal. Some jurisdictions have stop and identify laws that require you to provide identification during a lawful stop. Refuse? That's now a criminal offense and off to jail you go. Critics argue this is a coercion tactic that targets marginalized communities and turns a simple encounter into an arrest for basically nothing. Supporters say it helps officers verify identities and investigate potential crimes. Either way, knowing your state's laws matters because I don't have to show you anything might sound tough, but it can also land you in handcuffs. The requirement varies wildly by state, so what's legal in one place might get you arrested in another. 1. Booking delays. And for our grand finale, let's talk about how cops can keep you sitting in a cell way longer than they're supposed to, just to mess with your head. Booking delays are when officers hold you in custody past the point where they should have filed charges. You're stuck in a cell with no idea when this ends, getting more stressed and desperate by the hour. The longer you sit there, the more willing you become to cooperate, confess, or take whatever deal they dangle in front of you just to escape. This whole tactic works because you're isolated, exhausted, and usually can't get to a lawyer yet. The wait isn't accidental. It's designed to break you down. Some delays are supposedly for complex investigations, but extended holds used mainly to pressure confessions? That's just psychological warfare with a badge. So yeah, they can keep you waiting, keep you guessing and use that time to get what they want. Well, that was fun. 25 ways cops have the home field advantage and most of us didn't even know we were playing an away game. Look, this whole video wasn't some guide to becoming a criminal mastermind. It was more like finding out the referee has been reading from a different rulebook this entire time. Most people think everyone plays by the same rules. Nope. Officers have shields, tricks, and get out of accountability free cards that would make Monopoly players jealous. But now you're in on the secret. Should you test any of this? Hard no. Knowledge is power, but common sense is still your best friend. Don't make me regret teaching you things. Now, do you want your mind blown even more? Check out 25 legal loopholes that defy common sense. It is wild. But if you just need to decompress after all this heavy stuff, I've also got 25 really fascinating facts about stamps waiting just for you. I know what you're thinking. Stamps? But seriously, it slaps. Links are in the description. Alright, like I said, hit that like button, smash subscribe, and ring that bell. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Just don't get arrested, okay? Good Lord.